Your Instagram handle is Gypset Goddess. What has been your most Gypset Goddessy moment?
Ooh, my most Gypset Goddessy moment would probably be, there have been a lot of them, I guess. But maybe I went to Peru. I went on this massive hike in Peru that was up in the mountains.
Machu Picchu?
No, it wasn't Machu Picchu. It was somewhere else. To be honest with you, I slept in the van ride there because I get really car sick in bumpy rides and on the way home. So I have no idea where I went. It was this magical place in the mountains of Peru, but I didn't prepare at all. I didn't really understand what hiking at altitude entails. So I didn't prepare at all. And I got there and found myself just skipping up the hills at 16,000 feet because it turns out that I'm naturally inclined to high places. But I think that was a really good Gypset Goddessy moment because I guess how you do anything is how you do everything. And what I learned in that moment is I'll always work it out.
Hell yeah. Nice. That seems like so much fun. I could just picture you gallivanting out there in the mountains.
I had a llama. I was holding a llama on a leash with me. We were skipping together.
No, you weren't. All right, we
I
gotta see the
was.
pictures for
You
that.
can find the photo on my Instagram.
Fair enough. What are a couple weird things you did as a kid?
I used to mix up, take these little travel shampoo bottles that I would find in my parents' bathroom, and I would mix up all of my mom's shampoos and body washes and lotions and make just the most disgusting looking concoction. But I was convinced that it was magical, and then I would go squirt it on rocks outside and hope that I could do some alchemy, except that the rocks never really changed. I would look at it the next day and convince myself that the rock had melted a little bit or changed shape, but it didn't really change shape.
So did your mom think you were absolutely crazy?
No, she played into it. She was like, oh, you're making one of your potions right now. That's great. Let me know if it works. You could be onto something.
That's so nice.
Yeah, she's sweet.
That's so supportive. What are some of the alter egos you've had in your life?
I've had a lot of alter egos in my life. I think with each period that I find myself in, there's a new alter ego. So in high school, I had two different ones. There was Stella and Hazel. And both of those really liked to go to concerts and get backstage at concerts and smoke weed with their favorite rock stars. And it's funny because alter egos have always offered something to me that I felt I didn't have myself. So in that sort of incarnation, I think it was like these alter egos of mine had the ability to converse with famous people like equals, when inside I was sort of shitting myself, feeling like I had no business being in the conversation. And then in college, I had C Money Mojo, who, this was like around when 8 Mile came out, and being from Michigan, I decided that I would freestyle rap. And so C Money was someone that had the confidence to, have everyone's attention and freestyle rap and do something creative, on stage in a way in front of other people, which I was pretty afraid to do myself. And I think there were a few more in between then, but I think the next most significant one was probably Gypset Goddess.
And how long have you had Gypset Goddess for, or been her?
I've been Gypset Goddess for about 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah. This one's extending longer than most.
How would you describe her aside from being the flowing llama guiding shepherd?
Other than skipping with llamas on high peaks. Gypset Goddess is someone who doesn't let her fears hold her back ever. So, and if anything is sort of motivated by fear. So I guess in my own life, where sometimes if I don't know how to do something or I don't understand it, it's easier to just step away and quit than recognize that I'm weak in some way. I think that Gypset Goddess sort of thrives in those situations and feels a need to conquer it and become at least passable at it, if not great.
What's been your greatest lifelong personal dream?
I don't know if I have a lifelong personal dream. It changes so often.
Yeah.
I guess maybe to always have friends that I can trust. I think I've had that one for longer than many others because I grew up and I had a pretty hard time with other kids my age. So I didn't have a lot of friends that I could trust. So I think my lifelong dream has been to have a really tight-knit core group of friends that I love, that love me, that, are all trustworthy.
What are you most afraid of?
I am most afraid of drowning, I think.
What's that all
Actually,
about?
I don't really know. I've had a couple of yoga teachers tell me that maybe I drowned in a past life
Oh, interesting.
and that's where it comes
fascinating.
from. But yeah, it's weird because I've never even had a near drowning experience, and I'm a really strong swimmer, but I
So
have
you still
dreams
jump
about,
in there.
yeah, I have dreams about drowning sometimes that just really get me, and I wake up and I feel like I can't breathe, and it's just the scariest feeling.
Interesting.
And deep water really scares me too. Like deep water where you can't see down through it and see the bottom. You never know what's under
Yeah,
there.
perhaps just the idea of just being so under and not being able to get out, like with any kind of challenge that you have in your life, perhaps. I don't know.
There could be something to that.
Yeah, I had a dream expert on the show. Oh, it was a while ago, but she like talked into that, and like our dreams can mean so many different things. It's like so wild. So that was Victoria Allen, who we had on last year.
I feel like a lot of times I'm really happy that dreams can mean different things than whatever they are on the surface, because I have some weird ones. Like I'll have a dream that all of my teeth fell out. And I don't know, I brush my teeth a lot. I don't think I have tooth decay. So I hope it's not actually about my
Yeah.
teeth falling out.
Well, you certainly have a wild imagination.
I do.
Yeah, tell us about that.
I don't notice it so much in my waking life, I think, but it comes out a lot in my dreams. They're just weird.
And when you like come up with ideas, do you feel like you manifest a lot of them in real life as well?
I think a lot of times it sort of happens by accident. I'm pretty creative myself, and I'll come up with an idea that I think is good, but I find that always in working with it and developing it, other things pop up, and it usually ends up going in a direction that's so much better than I could have imagined from the start, but that I also didn't expect at all. It's sort of this magical process that happens, I think, with most things that I do, where I don't entirely know what I'm doing, but I believe that I have the power to figure it out, and then different things come up.
That's so cool. And I'm hearing like between the imagination and then the fearlessness of Gypset Goddess, like that's a fucking potent combo right there.
Well, I'm hoping to take some of that fearlessness myself. I think I have over the years.
What is the best part and worst part about being a social influencer?
The best part, I would say, are the perks. There's a lot of great perks. I get to go on free trips, and I get lots of free clothing, and I think most of the time, almost all the time, that I want something, even if I don't have a relationship with the brand, it's kind of nice that I can leverage my following to reach out and just ask for things. So the perks of it are really amazing. But I think the worst part about it is that also by nature, it is about how things look. And so it forces me to spend so much more time and energy thinking about the way that I look and the way that other people are perceiving me than I think I would if I did any other job. And that can get kind of heavy sometimes. And if you're not careful, I think it can also sort of warp your worldview in a way that's not so positive.
I definitely want to dive deeper into that. You're sitting in like such an interesting position as a social influencer who's using like social media in like a turbo mode, let's say. You know, it's like a really like an interesting, like, I guess, microcosm of how everyone uses social media. It's like, you know, the extreme example, like that's what you do for a living.
Yeah.
So I definitely want to get more into that. This show is all about being real. So what is something that is real for you in your life right now?
Something that's real for me in my life right now is I'm feeling a lot of possibility, which is really nice because I think, I guess I've been out of it for a little while, but for about 6 months there, I was pretty depressed. I had a relationship go sour on me very unexpectedly, and I just wasn't feeling motivated in what I was doing with my Instagram and my other streams of income that are related to that. So I was just feeling pretty low. But then I just decided to step out of my comfort zone in a variety of different ways. I said yes to a bunch of things I would usually say no to because I was just sort of desperate to change it up and try something different. Even if it wasn't the right thing, maybe it would lead me to wherever that was. And now I'm finally sitting on the other side of it, which is great. And I feel like there are a lot of possibilities that I'm excited about. So I wake up in the morning excited rather than waking up in the morning dreading the day. And it's just so refreshing.
You're so courageous. And like, I already knew you were super smart, but so often, like when people come to me and they feel like they're in a rut or they're struggling with something, like I always just say, like, try something new. You know, like get off like the thing that you're fixated with and change up your pattern, get off the autopilot, because like taking like little risks like that just open up so much possibility and perspective. And like clearly, like you're living in a world of possibility. You're like upset about a breakup, and now like the whole world is open up to you. So that's
the world
amazing.
is my oyster.
I like it a lot. And then the last question of this part of the interview, this show is called The One and Only. The premise essentially is that there's 7 billion people, but only one of each of us. And it's easy to forget that sometimes in this crazy, wild world that we live in with all this societal conditioning. So my question for you, Caitlin, is what makes you the one and only? What makes you one of a kind?
My cleverness and ingenuity.
Welcome to the show, the one and only Caitlin Turner. It's awesome to have you on the show. We met just like 2 months ago, I'd say, on the 4th of July.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, we went out to Malibu with an awesome crew of amazing, magical beings, individuals. We had a great time out there.
Yeah, in the magical mystery van.
Yes, indeed. And then I saw you give such a powerful talk at The Real.
That was one of the things that I did to step out of my comfort zone when I was at that plateau that we talked about.
It was incredible, and I'd love to get into that as we go through this talk. But you're a super creative, inspiring person. It was just so obvious that I wanted to get mic'd up with you and have you on the show. So as you probably pieced together as you were listening to that first part of the interview, is that Caitlin has this alter ego, this Instagram handle called Gypset Goddess. She is inspiring people globally to really get into yoga and self-expression. And you're a blogger. You've had your show in Bali, and you have a massive Instagram following of well over 300,000 people that you've built from scratch just 5 years ago.
Yes, it started 5 years ago.
Which is truly incredible. So I'd love to get to know you better here in the next hour or so and hear just a little bit about your evolution from the little girl who is taking the travel bottles and making little potions to becoming the rock star that you are today. So I'd love to hear some kind of behind the scenes, some of your greatest transformational moments that have brought you to where you're at right now. Living in this world of possibilities and where you're going. And then I'd love to take a deeper dive into the idea of alter egos and just taking a look at what's real in social media.
Let's do it.
And where we're at today. So let's rock and roll. So wanted to ask you another question in regards to like, who are you? Because you have alter egos and then there's Caitlin. So, my question for you is like, what are the differences between Gypset Goddess and Caitlin?
That's a really good question. I don't know if I think about that one that often, actually. I think the major difference is that Gypset Goddess is only certain parts of myself, where Caitlin is the whole. And so the parts of Gypset Goddess that you see are, Gypset Goddess always has perfect hair and makeup, and I can promise you that Caitlin does not. So that's a major difference, I think, is just in the sort of image part of it. And I think that Gypset Goddess is a little bit more preachy than I am personally. I mean, I like to tell stories and everything, but Gypset Goddess sometimes tells you what you should do.
Oh, interesting.
And in my day-to-day life as Caitlin, I'm not a big fan of the word should. So it's an interesting thing to carry that around. And sometimes it feels odd to write, but when you're writing from a persona rather than as yourself, you can sort of say things that you wouldn't say normally.
That's so fascinating. What's the difference like with the conversation in your head when you're Caitlin and when you're Gypset Goddess or when you're alter egos?
I think Gypset Goddess believes more in magic than Caitlin does. It's so weird to talk about myself in the third person this much, actually, too. So I would say I'm more of a realist, and Gypset Goddess is more of a fantastic, you can manifest anything you want and the world is filled with magic, which I think I do believe, but I also am a lot more grounded than I may seem on social media.
Gotcha. Interesting. And how do you get into the zone, like in an alter ego? Part of the reason I'm asking is I'm really intrigued by the idea of alter egos, especially lately, because I look at my own, like where I'm at today and my own personal growth. And I feel like developing an alter ego that kind of possesses some of the behaviors and qualities that are a little bit more of a stretch or a little bit more challenging for me would be really advantageous for me to continue to expand and to become a better me. And I think it's easier when we like create a persona and alter ego where we're like, that's what this person would do, and then like allowing ourselves to kind of play in that space. So for me, I'm kind of like want to create this alter ego that is super connected and authentic, like connected to people, as well as kind of like a rock star and super duper playful, because I can get like a really serious at times. Like I've definitely been more committed to making the show more fun, because like being real, like it doesn't have to be just like this, like
it doesn't have to be so heavy
subject. Yeah. So I'm curious to know like how you like kind of drop into it and go from one to another without getting completely lost in an alter ego.
Well, I think it helps to be a bit of a chameleon naturally. When I was younger, I moved to Arizona with one of my good girlfriends from Michigan, where I grew up, to go to college. And she used to get really frustrated with me because we would go to different parties and she would say that my personality always changed. And I think that that's because for me, alter egos really have been, to your point, always something where it was a different way of showing up that would be more effective for whatever I was trying to do than if I would just show up simply as myself with my own limitations and set of problems that I accepted as truths all the time. So I think that that's why my personality would change. And I found that the biggest way to do it is, I think so much about the way that we're perceived has to do with our image, because before we ever speak or say anything, people see us walking up to them. And I've found that when creating alter egos, clothing and sort of a costume almost helps. Like I don't know which alter ego this was, but in college I had this weird braided leather headband that I would tie around my head like a hippie headband style, and it was my adventure headband. And when I put that thing on, it was like I was a different person. I would go climb straight rock faces when I'm afraid of heights and all of these different things that I wouldn't normally do. But I think you might have an alter ego already.
I do.
Do you have one when you wear your white hat? That's what you were wearing when I met you, and I feel like I always associate you with that hat.
I realize that when I'm wearing something, I think they call it peacocking, when someone is wearing like a really like flamboyant outfit that like you can't help but notice. And it does give me more liberation to play, like whether I'm wearing like huge white cowboy hat or if I'm wearing like leggings, it gives me this permission to be playful and fun. So I definitely hear that. And as we were talking about when I was saying in terms of being more real and authentic online, it seems like counterintuitive to say I need to develop an alter ego that makes me more authentic and connected online. But the reality is where I'm at today is like I have fear about that. I feel like I don't know how to connect authentically with people like that. I can't physically see them in the flesh, like we're not having like, a two-way dialogue in the moment. So for me, it's like a subtle shift that allows my walls to come down a little bit further, so I can create more authentic and real relationships with you who's listening right now. Because I have no idea who you are.
I think that's what's beautiful about alter egos, though, is that when we're even when we're being ourselves, when we're in costume or wearing the sort of metaphorical mask of an alter ego, it disassociates you from yourself a little bit, I think, which can be really valuable if you're trying to drop inhibitions or be more vulnerable or share yourself more, because there's a small part of you that's almost reserved, where if you get judged by whatever you say or what you're wearing or whatever it is that you're worried about, it's sort of like people are judging the alter ego, but they're not judging you. And so I think it can create a lot of freedom there to play, because it's not who you are, it's who you're being.
Yeah, I haven't looked at it from that perspective, because I've been really focused on being so grounded that it doesn't really matter what other people think of me. I'm going to do my thing and be confident and grounded in that.
I get that from you.
But it's certainly a work in progress as a major people pleaser. But something that I've been noticing as well that I want to kind of incorporate into this kind of playful alter ego that I'm developing here. I still need a name for it. So if anyone wants to help me name it, I would love your suggestions. but is when I'm feeling fear, to just give so much love away.
Interesting.
Yeah. Like I noticed that this weekend. I was out in Summit in Eden, Utah. And I'd noticed like from time to time I'd be super playful, and then I'd be like in a more judgmental place where I'd be wondering about my social standing and like
I think
insecurities.
that's easy to do there.
And I've noticed whenever I feel that fear, it's like, all right, let me just give love away and be love. And I've noticed that really works a lot versus like continuing to dive down this rabbit hole of fear and only get more self-critical.
I kind of do that same thing, but for me, in place of love, it's gratitude that I use. So when I get into those sort of dark moments where I'm too in my head and overly questioning of whatever situation that I'm in, I just kind of look around and find things to be grateful for. And even if I feel a little bit ridiculous while I'm doing it, like I'll be really angry and then I'll be sitting there in my head trying to list things that I feel grateful for. But if I take a breath after doing that for like 10 seconds, I am in a better place. It really elevates my mood without even trying. It's sort of like mind misdirection.
Yeah. Breathing and gratitude. Get that. Right?
Yes. Can get them everywhere.
Right.
They're with you all the time.
Yeah. Right. It's like, I don't get how that's such an easy thing to forget, like in a dark moment. So it's awesome that you do that and it works. And thank you for sharing that with us. Caitlin, I want to hear more of your story. So your evolution, I know you grew up in Michigan and now you're living in LA. You lived in Arizona for a bit. So I'm curious, what have been some of those key pivotal moments that have supported you in your journey to become the woman that you are here today?
Well, what's interesting is that I feel like such a theme in my life is overcoming fear. And also, I think one of my biggest strengths is that I function really well under pressure. Like I even thrive under pressure. There are things that it's sort of the adrenaline really helps me. There are things that I can't do in my normal life that if you put me under pressure in sort of a fear situation, all of a sudden I can do these amazing things. And I think that a big part of what led me to that, where I had a couple of near-death experiences, actually. Not where I was almost dead in a medical way, but for example, I worked at a skateboarding and snowboarding shop when I was 15. And I was walking out the door to leave at the end of the night, and this guy in a ski mask with a gun jumped out and pushed me back in through the door and like held a gun to my head and walked me up to the front of the store where he proceeded to take all of the money and everything. But I was basically the hostage for the beginning of that whole thing, which was obviously something I never expected to happen to me.
How long did this whole thing
in my life? It was over about a half-hour period. So like I had the gun on me for about 10 minutes of that, and then the rest was him like walking around to various safes that were hidden in the store and taking money and running upstairs to get these custom Burton snowboards and whatever. But the thing that happened is he finally let me go, and he had all of us together in a line, and he said, now everybody lay down on the floor. And we kind of thought we were going to die. Like we kind of thought that he was going to just lay us on the floor and kill us or something. And so everyone else laid on their back, but I had my cell phone sort of in my hand still, and he hadn't noticed. So I laid on my stomach, and I dialed 911 on the phone, and I put my ear down on it on the ground. And I just talked to the 911 operator as if I was talking to the other people who worked in the store. I was like, man, guys, can you believe that Modern Skate and Surf is getting robbed right now? This is so scary. We might die. I wish someone would come. And then the police actually did come. And so it saved us. And they didn't catch the guy until like a week later. But the thing is like hearing those sirens and everything made the guy leave. And I think that was one of the, like, I was only 15. I didn't even really know what I was doing. And everybody else who was on the staff was kind of mad at me. They were like, you're calling the police? This guy's going to kill us. Get off your phone. But to me, it felt like the right thing to do. And I was the only one who had my head in that moment under pressure. And I think I've carried that with me for a long time as a truth about myself that, you know, I'm a fighter. And when you place me against a wall or put me in a situation that's scary, I'll come out of it one way or another, like using my intelligence and my wits and that kind of thing.
Holy moly, what a story.
It's kind of a crazy one.
Seriously, a way to show up in the moment and be a hero. That's what I'm hearing.
That's a weird word, but I guess so.
I mean, that's what it is, for sure. And it starts with like one action. Like doesn't matter if like you were in like a similar situation like 20 times before that. Once you do it, like, you're capable of it, right? And then that's kind of the new normal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've always kind of carried that with me because there are a few things that are scarier than that moment, actually. Like really having a gun on you from a stranger in a ski mask that's like desperate for something, obviously, or they wouldn't be in that position. Like that's a really, really vulnerable, scary situation. But I made it through. So what else can I do that with?
Wow. Okay.
And I think that it's that sort of wealth of like determination to survive and thrive that ends up actually fueling a lot of what Gypset Goddess says these days.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so that was 15.
Yeah, so that was 15.
What happened like after high school?
After high school, I went to college at Arizona State, which was the biggest party school in the country at that time.
Sun Devils?
Yeah, the Sun Devils. But I was never really that into the college environment. I lived off campus my first year, and I'd always had trouble being a joiner, which I guess your first year of college you're kind of supposed to do. You live in the dorms and you do this whole communal thing, but I had trouble being a part of communities still at that time. So I was just getting into mischief. I would go out to bars a lot in college, actually, with my fake ID. I had a fake ID of somebody who was like 28 when I was 18 with a really complicated last name that I had to learn how to spell so that I could look legit. And I would try and get into bars. And I was really not into climbing, but I guess into taking risks. Like this one time I was in Sedona where they have these red sandstone rocks that you're really not supposed to climb ever. It's a really dumb thing to do. But somehow I thought it was a great idea to climb this huge 50-foot straight rock face with a friend of mine who felt very unsafe about the whole thing. And that was another weird one where we were about halfway up and all of a sudden, oh, by the way, I was climbing this rock face in a bikini and some mucklucks, these like knit boots with just like leather soles on the bottom. So no grip whatsoever.
Okay. Hopefully you got some good pictures for Instagram.
They're not on Instagram. This was pre-Instagram. But we got about halfway up and my shoe kept on falling down. So I leaned down to pull it up. And right in that moment, my friend who was above me knocked down a boulder that was like 4 times the size of my head.
Oh my God.
And it hit me in the butt on the way down. And basically, if I wouldn't have leaned down in that perfect moment to grab my shoe and pull it up, that boulder would have hit me in the face. And I would be dead. And that was another one of those moments where it's like, okay, wow, we almost just died and we're halfway up a cliff face where we shouldn't be climbing. But it was the weirdest thing. I just looked at the mountain, and I'm not even an experienced climber, but somehow I just saw this route. Like, in movies when somebody's looking at something and you see the route, it turns all blue or red and it's all marked out. I felt like I had that, and I was like, no, it's okay. I can get us out of this. I see the way. We'll get to the top and we'll be fine. And we did. I led the way and I turned into like a little snake, like snaking under these boulders and just sort of slithering up the rock face until we got to the top. But I think it's been these really sort of getting put in a box type of situations where it's, there's not surviving or surviving, and I'm going to survive.
Yeah.
Every time.
Wow. Okay.
So I think that was college. And then I was personal assistant for a little while. I was sort of a rent-a-wife, actually. I would find these really wealthy men who didn't have wives and needed like a female touch in their homes, basically. So I would go in and make sure that the refrigerator was always stocked and like manage all of the workers in the house.
I could use something like that these days.
Everyone could. It's the best thing to have an assistant like that. But I hit a big wall because I realized that I wanted to have the assistant, not be the assistant.
Yep.
And that was the last time that I ever had a technically real job, actually. I quit and I moved to Paris for a year just to get away and try something different. Mm-hmm. And then when I came back, I became a yoga teacher. And that's sort of the beginning of the Gypset Goddess path, I guess, because yoga is such a big part of it. And then I guess that was even sort of another alter ego, was like Caitlin, the yoga teacher. I was one of those like very spiritually somewhat annoying people for a little while there.
Gotcha. So like when you found yoga, did things change a lot for you?
They did, because I feel like I had always felt sort of out of control, as if I was a pinball sort of getting bounced around by the elements and the forces of the world. And I always had felt like I didn't have a whole lot of control. And once I started practicing yoga and I just tuned into my breath, and it brought me so much more into my body than I had been in so long, that it kind of just helped me see that I could control myself, even if I couldn't control all of the things that were around me or happening to me. And when you can truly control yourself, that's a really, really powerful thing to have in your pocket. And yoga gave me that, which helped me a lot. It made me a lot calmer, too. I was a bit crazy when I was younger, I think, as you can tell from these stories that I've told you so far.
So good. I have recently gotten into yoga, and I'm someone who loves to just play in my head and like subscribe to the voice in my head. And I'm really enjoying getting more into my body and like reminding myself, like when I'm in like a super heady place, like go to yoga, go for a run, have a little solo dance party.
I love that about yoga. I had this teacher in one of my teacher trainings that said, quit trying so hard and try easy. And so he'd put us in these poses that weren't even that difficult. It would be like a crescent lunge or a warrior one. But he'd have us hold it for like 2 minutes, where by the end of it, your legs are completely on fire and you just want to kill this person who's holding you there. But he'd always say, come on, this is just 2 minutes of your life. 2 minutes to the rest of your life. Just breathe through it. It's 2 minutes. And I think the metaphor of that whole thing was, if you can just breathe through this, what else can you breathe through? Because nothing's going to last forever. Whatever this sensation is that's difficult that you're dealing with won't be there forever. It's just here right now, and you need to breathe through it. And that was kind of a mind-blowing realization for me, because I would have situations like that and I would just run the other way rather than sitting with it.
That's so good. And for anyone who's going through a tough time right now, it's temporary. Breathe through it.
You have
Take
to.
a nice deep breath right now. So at this point, I'm guessing you're a yoga teacher. You start this Instagram account.
Well, that
came later?
It did a little bit.
What are we missing here?
Well,
Connect
I was
the
a
dots
yoga
for us.
teacher and I loved that, but I was teaching about 17 classes a week and making absolutely no money. So then I decided that I should be the studio owner, because they would make the money. So I opened a pop-up studio in northern Michigan, in this little town where my parents have a summer house. And I did that for a summer to sort of try it on and see if I liked being the studio owner. And it was in that time where I was in this really small town that had probably a population of like 1,000 year-round. And the locals there didn't really like me that much. I was like this weird blonde hippie girl that dressed completely different. And I'm not even very hippie, but compared to the people that lived in this town, I was like the hippiest of all hippie. And they weren't very nice to me. They weren't mean, but they just weren't really inviting. I wasn't part of their community. So I just started doing handstands all the time and taking photos of them to try and see what my progress was and see what I could do differently. And I shared them on Instagram, and it started to take off. It was a little bit of a right place, right time thing. Like, in being so bored and lonely, actually, in my own life, I went and shared this thing and put it out there online. And that's when I really started learning to connect with people.
Interesting. And before, you were talking about shallow connection versus deep connection. So how would you say like that kind of connection was? Would you say that was more shallow or?
Well, it started out as actually a pretty deep thing, because it's, as we were discussing with alter egos, I was a little bit afraid to connect with people and share myself as Caitlin. But once I was Gypset Goddess and, you know, that wasn't attached to Caitlin anymore, all of a sudden I could be way more bold and say things that I wouldn't normally say in my life. So it started out in the beginning as some of the most authentic posts that I've ever even done. And what's funny is I looked back recently, because I sort of have this memory now 5 years later when I think about it of like, oh, the beginning when I was so authentic and I wasn't making any money from this. So it was all just very pure. But I went back and read the posts recently, and they're not super deep paragraphs about how awful life is or how great life is. They're just like little sayings that are happy or, you know, little encouraging things for people. But the funny thing is that was really authentic to me at the time. I had a pretty easy life. And so I just shared what was coming up.
Yeah. Doesn't sound like you were trying too hard either.
No, that was the key to it.
Yeah.
It's like those people when you meet somebody, if they're so desperate to be your friend, there's almost something kind of repellent about it. Versus if somebody just shows up and loves who they are, it's hard not to agree with them.
Yeah, absolutely. So then it started just taking off and you just started like growing like crazy?
Yeah, it started taking off just naturally on its own. And then I kind of saw a window happening where people were doing these things called yoga challenges, where they would put up a pose every day and encourage their followers to do the pose. But it was like a really disorganized sort of thing that I saw these two girls with huge accounts doing. And so I messaged them and I kind of turned into like a stalker a little bit. Like I followed them and I would go comment on every single one of their posts and be super encouraging. And I asked them if they would let me host the challenge with them. And I said, I'll do all the work. I'll do everything. I'll write all of the captions for the posts. And I also wrote the contest rules. Rule number 1 was follow all of the hosts of the contest.
Smart.
So every month, and we made it a 30-day contest that we did every month for like a year. And so every month when we would do that one post, in that moment, it would be like 5,000 followers, 3,000 followers, whatever it was. And I mean, really, that's just one example, but that's how it grew the whole time, was by collaborating with other people and finding ways to have mutually beneficial situations. You know, I needed their followers and they didn't really want to write all of this stuff, which I loved doing. So that's how you grow social media. You just collaborate with people.
1 + 1 = 3, the power of partnership right there.
True, exactly.
That's so smart. Like, I think of how many times I've tried to do it all alone.
Oh, it's impossible that way.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not impossible. You can do it, but it's so much harder and will take so much longer.
Gotcha. That must have been so exciting.
It was.
Continuing to like make an impact on more people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just kept growing and growing and growing. And was there a point where it just became like a lot of pressure?
Probably when I started making money off of it is where the pressure started, because it was just sort of this fun hobby thing that I did. And I wasn't so much thinking about where it would go or what I would do with it. It was just fun. And I started getting a few free things and like a couple of influencer trips, but it was still just really fun. Like I could, live my life without any of that and it would be fine. But then when I started getting bigger contracts, I remember this one time I signed a large contract and I was staying in a hotel, and somebody, the morning after I signed like the biggest contract of my life to date, somebody broke into my room and stole all of my jewelry. And it was kind of expensive jewelry. And so I put a post up about it on my Instagram, just about how violated I felt and whatever. And then I got a call from the owner of the company who said, we really want you to be authentic, like be yourself, but also maybe don't post stuff like that because that was a really, really negative post and you're a positive yoga influencer. And that was like one of the moments that I always look back on and think about when people ask me like where the pressure started, is it was moments like that. Like that was how I was authentically feeling.
You were told not to be authentic and vulnerable.
Yeah, like, oh, be authentic, but only when it looks good, sort of thing.
Ugh.
Yeah, it felt a little nasty.
Yeah.
And it put a fear in me, too, that wasn't really there before. Because before, it was about fun and just sort of like hanging it all out there. Now I had to be more strategic about it. Like, hang it out there in a way that's acceptable, but like, don't hang it out there too much. And so it started this thing where I would second guess myself really often. Like, is this acceptable? Is this too much? Is this too real? And it's weird to start asking yourself questions that way.
Yeah. Without giving away your whole talk, which was on this subject, I'd love to just like have you take us kind of where that ultimately went and like how you've learned from that. Like I know you've like really owned this whole experience. So I'd love to have you take us a little further down that rabbit hole.
Well, it went to a place where there was a point where just nothing seemed good enough anymore because I had become so calculated with the way that I was presenting myself and my image on this page that it's sort of like I let my followers and the brands that I was working with co-opt Gypset Goddess. Like she wasn't really my alter ego anymore. She was just this, sort of golden handcuffs persona that I was connected to that everybody expected so much from. And all of a sudden Gypset Goddess became not somebody I sort of was, but somebody that I wasn't even connected to. So I would Photoshop my photos a lot. I wouldn't really copy other people, but I would see different concepts or color schemes or things that I thought looked cool, and like all of my energy would go into recreating that rather than creating something of my own, which probably would have been even better. And it led me to a really unhappy place, actually, where I almost quit everything until I decided to just say fuck it and start being real, actually. And all of a sudden, the whole thing felt way more fun again.
Mm-hmm. And how's your audience responded to that?
So good. They love me again. I got a lot of direct messages from people saying that they missed me or that they had unfollowed me for a while, but they were really excited to follow me again. Like I got very specific feedback.
And do you feel liberated? Like, I'm just curious, like.
Yeah, I do feel liberated, and it helped me turn a page where for so long I felt like I was sort of a prisoner of the people that were paying me or the people that I needed to like my posts. It liberated me to a place where I believe in myself again, and I know that there's credibility in what I've built. So even if it were to all turn to dust, I know I could do it again and that I would be okay. It helped me become like not so attached to it.
That's awesome. So what are you committed to moving forward?
I'm committed to, well, being more authentic on my social for sure, but I just think it's so important to share the bad as much as we share the good. If you're in an influencer position, it seems like a really weird thing to do because it's sort of my job to look good and create this aspirational life all the time. But the people that I want to follow me are the people whose aspirational life looks like being authentic and sharing whatever comes up rather than being perfect and whatever that looks like to you.
Any like specific tips would you have for someone who's like wants to share a little bit more of themselves online, or like first steps, things that we can do at home?
My tip for that would be just check in with how you're feeling that day, and where the impulse is to give a pat answer like, oh, I'm doing great or whatever. Before you answer, check in and see if that really is the answer. And then ask yourself why you're giving an answer that's not the real answer. Unless it is the real answer, and then by all means, you're great, and that's great. But also don't overshare.
What's the line?
I think the line, I can give it to you in terms of an Instagram caption. Okay. If you've typed so much that it's cutting you off and not letting you type anymore, you're oversharing. Or maybe this just isn't the right venue for that particular story. But I think when we're telling our own stories, it's easy to get in our heads and think that like we need to give context for everything and details for every single thing and explain every single feeling, when really you can kind of just be a little bit more general and give people the gist of it and let them fill in their own blanks. And I think that's way more helpful than to actually evoke emotion and inspire people. Because if you give them every single piece of the puzzle, it's no longer a story they can relate to entirely. They're just listening to you tell your very specific story.
All of that really resonates with me. Oftentimes I'll make posts and I'm like, oh, I got to cut some words out. It's like, it's getting cut off. Something that I find myself doing is I'm definitely an oversharer. So there's some people who don't share that much of, themselves, don't let them be seen online. I feel like I'm in the extreme example of that. Like I'll overshare a lot. And I realize that by sharing too much, people don't know what to kind of cling onto or what the takeaway is. Mm-hmm. So that's my personal challenge. But I know that kind of goes against the general norm. I'd say there's more people that err on the side of undersharing, mm-hmm. whether in fear of being judged or the fear of being seen or, whatever it may be.
All I can do is just be really encouraging about that, because I fully understand the fear that comes with being perceived in a way that you think is not great. Yeah. But also everybody has that fear. Right. So as soon as you allow yourself to be seen that way, it allows other people can relate to you, and they'll be so much more accepting than you give them credit for, because when they see you show yourself that way, they want to be receiving because they know how hard that would be for them. Right. So give people more credit. They want to listen to you and they want to love you.
Yeah, absolutely. Get that. It's really, really interesting that I think on like the deepest level, as human beings, we want to feel like we matter. We want to feel like we're here for a reason. We want to be seen. We want to be appreciated. But if we don't share ourselves with other people, we don't allow them to see us. So we're actually robbing ourselves of what we ultimately want most.
Wow, I'm going to have to sit with that one for a second. That was really well said.
I've said it multiple times. I mean, it's like a big part of the TEDx talk that I just gave that's all about social media, which like we have this platform, this like vehicle communication tool that never existed. And now we've got it. And I mean, I personally think that, yeah, people benefit from it. It's nice to be able to see what people are up to, whether they're active people in your life or people you went to high school with. But it's like, okay, what's next? And like, I personally think like, and there's a lot of super fake stuff on social media. There's a lot of people who just brag and just like, you know, want to get the likes because it'll make them feel good. And like, I'm not saying that there's anything necessarily wrong with that, but I think that like the true potential of social media, like we don't know how to use it yet. That's the way that I see. So I'm curious to get your take on like where social media is today.
I would agree with that in a lot of ways, because on the surface, we say that we're on social media to connect with other people. But are we really connecting? And, you know, what is sort of the depth of that connection? And how long will it last? Like, how close are we really to our 600 Facebook friends or however many you have? And so it's an interesting thing. I feel like unless we're able to be, social media is a lot like life. You know, the tricks that you use to connect with people in life work on social media too. And so if you really want to connect with people in life, you need to bring that vulnerability to the table. Otherwise, there's nothing to relate to and there's nothing to connect with. And I think that until we have that sort of vulnerability and authenticity on social media, it's less about connecting and more about looking and sort of just a voyeuristic thing, because a lot of times we go on Facebook and we look at what people in our lives are doing, but we don't really talk to them about it. We don't necessarily send them messages and we just look at it. We're watching. Right. But if we really want to connect, then we need to be talking.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, just like we want people to, you know, acknowledge us and see us, like we can give other people that gift as well. Mm-hmm. So that's like the space that I've been playing in. Like I realize that a lot of the things that I believe, like I have the opportunity to lean more deeply into myself.
Oh, that makes sense. I would agree with that.
All right. Thank you, Caitlin. It is time for the truth challenge. So I'm going to give you 5 questions that I'll come up with specifically for you. Most of them as we've just been sitting here having this conversation.
Okay.
And you're going to have 30 seconds to answer each. And it's your job to answer them honestly and authentically. Do you accept the challenge?
I do.
All right.
I'm a little scared.
Yeah. The truth challenge with the one and only Gypset Goddess, Caitlin Turner. Question number 1 for you. What is the toughest subject for you to talk about publicly?
Myself. Easy answer. The toughest subject to talk about is myself, because I always want to impress people, I think, naturally. So it seems like no story is ever good enough, or like I've given the wrong answer to questions. So I'm my own worst critic. So talking about myself is hard.
Question number 2 for you. What is your greatest opportunity for growth?
If I could find a way to quiet the voice in my head. It doesn't need to go away because it's necessary and it helps me, and there are situations where it actually physically keeps me safe. But also I'd love if it would just speak more quietly so that I could tune it out more easily in the moments when I need to.
Question number 3. This is our giving confessions question. What is something that you're embarrassed to admit, maybe ashamed to admit, that you just don't talk about, but you're willing to share anyways because it could help someone?
Let's see. I'm ashamed to admit that sometimes I socially smoke cigarettes, which it's something that I want to stop doing and just haven't yet. But it's so shameful to admit because I am, you know, the head of this massive Instagram account that's all about healthy living. And I feel like that's just so hypocritical. But the truth is, we all have our small hypocrisies. So hopefully it helps someone by the fact that I just shared that, because my heart is in my throat.
Question number 4 for you. Earlier in this conversation, you talked about creating deeper relationships and trust. So my question for you is, what is the formula for creating that, and how do you think you're doing at it right now?
Well, considering that I just semi threw myself under the bus for being a smoker, this ties in very well. I think that the key for me to connecting more deeply is to share my weaknesses, because I'm so good at sharing my strengths and discussing those that people forget that I have weaknesses and feelings, and that's really what connects you. So for me, I need to talk about my weaknesses more. And I think I've done that substantially in the last 5 minutes.
Yes, you have. And question number 5 for you. For your Instagram following and for, everyone who is supporting you, what is like the one message that if there was just, you had to drill it down to one, what would you want them to take away from you through your posts, through your presence?
I would want them to take away that you're already good enough for whatever it is that you wish you were doing. And there's honestly no time like the present to start. And if you don't know now, it's okay. Do it anyway, because you'll figure it out as you go.
The true challenge with the one and only Caitlin Turner. Thank you for your vulnerability and honesty. It's so refreshing to hear that. So real. And
I was afraid I wouldn't be real enough for this, actually. Coming into it, I had a big fear that I wasn't going to be real enough. So I'm glad I was.
Yeah. It's really interesting that being real, like we have all the answers like within us. I've shared this before, but if I walk into a conversation and people are talking about something I have no idea about, maybe they're talking about like, I don't know, science or something like that. Like I have no idea. Like I'm not gonna be able to really participate in that conversation. But if someone were to ask me a question about like how I'm feeling or what I think about something, I have all the answers to that.
That's
so
true.
I find it to be incredibly liberating to share what's real. I find like, I'm the only one who knows this versus like subject matter.
That's true. But man, it's sometimes so much
Sometimes
less scary to share subject matter.
Definitely. I find it to be very liberating. So earlier in the interview, we talked about shallow conversation versus deep conversation. And I think it's worth like just taking a second to talk about like, all right, what would you consider to be more shallow conversation and what's more deep conversation in case someone isn't thinking about that or might not really be aware or not know?
Shallow conversation is more administrative and procedural, or it's just sort of speaking from the senses. So, talking about the weather or, your job or the different things that are sort of the textbook questions that we ask. But I think deeper conversations are the ones where you feel something, whatever that is, whether you feel connected to the person or you feel happy or it makes you laugh or it makes you sad or you have empathy. Those are the moments when you're having a deep conversation. And it doesn't even have to be about some intense topic. It can just be as simple as a question of, what are you excited about in your life right now?
That's
and all of a sudden you're having a deep conversation rather than like, oh, well, what are you up to right now? What are you doing at work?
Right. And excited, like everyone likes to talk about what they're excited about.
Yeah,
so
you can see people light up. They're excited when you say the word excitement.
Yeah. I think you said it really well. For me, like shallow is very like circumstantial type of stuff, like the weather, talking about the news or sporting events, or if you're at a party, how do you, what brought you here? How do you know the host? And then, just like flying off that, or just like making an observation of something that's happening in your current environment versus something that, like you said, like that's going to evoke feeling, that's going to go a little bit deeper to understand the person that's in front of you. And like what I've noticed that when I have the courage to like go there with someone, like you got to get permission. You can't just like jump in and ask someone like what their greatest challenge is or what their greatest fear is.
Yeah, you have to warm it up a little bit.
Warm it up. You got to create a little camaraderie. But I find that having those conversations just creates a deeper level of connection like so fast. And I've had like a number of friends who have said to me like, I've known you for like 10, 15 years. And like, friends like this just like don't grow on trees. And I'm like, yeah, well, they don't grow on trees, but like you can create deep you don't need 10 years. You don't even need a year and a half to build a deep relationship. I said that I was at that birthday party at Summit in Utah this last weekend, and I was looking around, and the person that I've known the longest there is someone that I've known for 3 years. And like, I feel like these people are like family in a lot of ways. And most of them I've known for under a year. And I feel so close to these people because I go there with them.
Yeah, that's true. And I find that people are always pretty grateful for it. Like when you have those type of conversations with someone who's not used to having them, you can see them get a little bit uncomfortable first, but if they allow themselves to get into it, I find that almost every time at the end they say, "Thank you, this was a really great conversation. I don't find myself telling people things like that. I haven't told that story in forever." And there's a gratitude to it and a happiness in them because in connecting with you, it allowed them to also connect to a part of themselves.
Yeah, we all have the ability to do that every single day, which is so exciting for me, at least.
Yeah.
So, Caitlin, as we wrap up the show, what can we do to support you?
You can follow me on Instagram. You can watch my video of my talk from the Real Reel when it's posted. Stay tuned. And once you watch it, you can then verbally go tell all of your friends about it and email it to them and text them about it.
Very nice. It was such a powerful talk, Caitlin. I was really in awe of it. And I came to it about a week before I gave my TEDx talk. And I was like, if I can be nearly as effective and engaging and funny and fun and real as Caitlin, then I'll knock it out of the park. So this talk is so powerful. It's so important about, you really sharing your story and your evolution, your vulnerability, owning some decisions that you made that maybe you're not fully proud of, in this moment. And it was so, so good.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. What final words of wisdom, advice, inspiration do you have for listeners of The One and Only?
Well, this is speaking from my recent experience. I guess we're kind of back at the beginning when I talked about getting out of my rut, is that if you ever feel like you're at a plateau or you feel like you're just bored and uninspired with your life, you don't need to make some master plan. Just do anything different. Call a friend that you don't usually see and meet up with them and have a conversation because who knows what they'll say to you. Or, sign up for a seminar of teaching something that you've always wanted to learn. Just go do anything different that speaks to you. Or if there's nothing that speaks to you, just flip through anything. Flip through a message board until you find something and go try it. And if you do that, you'll find the answer somewhere. It may take a few different activities, but in doing all of these different things, we get to know ourselves. And when you know yourself better, then you'll know where to go.
The one and only Caitlin Turner. Thank you so much for being so cool and open and honest with us today. You're brilliant, you're creative, and an inspiration.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Next time we hang out, maybe bring your llama.
I wish I had one, but they're not very nice, actually.
Oh, that's no good.
Yeah, they bite.